want to start off today kind of discussing what's been going on with Trump, why it's important, because this affects all of us, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It affects us all negatively, not positively. And if you dislike Trump, it affects you in more negative ways, potentially, than it will people who think Trump is extremely good, or what some people would call thinking of him as a savior, which is kind of wild. But people are overzealous about everything. So there you have it. First and foremost, I'm not really going to go through and read these articles to you. I'm just going to, before I pull them up down here in the screen on the bottom right, I'm going to tell you what the facts and numbers are, because I don't want to go through the trouble finding these things for Obama as well, because Obama did the exact same thing that Trump is being indicted for, or that he was indicted for and that he's facing arraignment for, and all he had to do was pay a fine. And Obama's not the only former president to do this. It's pretty much every president has had to do this, and the punishment has always been a fine. It is a finable offense. It's not something that anybody has faced imprisonment over, okay? So that's why this matters, is because it's a complete abuse of authority, corruption of justice, and just a complete overstep of politicians utilizing the justice system as a weapon against their political opponents, which is in fact an act of a totalitarian, authoritarian, of dictatorship, and of tyrants. And that is why overall this should matter to you. Because if you have politicians who are going to use the legal system in a corrupt way like this, where they're abusing their authority and the legal system against dissidents and political opponents, what's to stop them from doing it to you? I'll elaborate on this later on. Oh wait, before we get into that, so Trump is indicted for hiding $300,000 roughly of campaign funds, where it came from. Some of the reports say it's like 180, some of them say it's some of them say 130, some of them say 280. We're just going to round it up from the highest number and say 300,000. I'm going to do that because it kind of makes the math a little bit easier as well. Okay? So 300,000, which if you don't have a lot of money, that sounds like a shit ton of money. The only reason that I don't think that sounds like so much money is because this is politics, and you're talking about a billionaire. Okay? Now, politics get donations of millions to billions of dollars to run their campaigns, which makes 300,000 a drop in the bucket. All right? So, comparatively to the amount of money that they typically raise, it's not much. And that's what I'm comparing this to, not my own experience with money and finance. So, there's that. Obama, on the other hand, $1.9 million of hidden funds. And the reason I'm doing this without pulling this up for you at first is once again, I want you to understand I'm not just pulling these numbers out of my ass. I'm not just making these things up. The thing is, Obama also spent roughly $35 million to suppress the information regarding this in relation to himself. So finding this information just takes more effort and more time, and I just didn't want to put in more time to pull these up on Obama. Now, if somebody wants to come in on one of the videos when this gets put up on YouTube or Rumble or a VOD or anything, and say that I'm just making this up on Obama, I will pull up the receipts. I will do it if you try to force my hand. I just didn't care to do it for this. So, just please understand, I'm doing this way to show you I'm not just making this up. I'm doing this very honestly. And it's not because I think Trump is the greatest guy ever. It's not because I think Obama's terrible. It's the fact that when it comes to things like politics, I don't look at the person. I look at their actions and I look at the legislation. I only look at who's doing it so that I understand which politicians are pushing for the legislation that I think is detrimental. Fact is, this happens on both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle do all the same shady shit. Both sides of the aisle do the same nonsense, and it shouldn't be looked at as, oh, this team bad. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I posted a Instagram story about this, and of course I get sent messages and DMs about how apparently Trump deserves this. So, Trump, indictment update from NPR. Indicted Manhattan grand jury. So understand also this is the Manhattan grand jury that's indicting Trump. It's not the state refused to act on this at a state level, which in New York they refused to act on this at a state level, and the federal judges said that this was insufficient for an indictment or arrest multiple times. Alvin Bragg, the DA of Manhattan, is pushing this through against everyone above him except for the people in the city of Manhattan. The city of Manhattan, not even New York City as a whole, just Manhattan, to indict Trump. Meanwhile, Alvin Bragg is also simultaneously releasing violent criminals who have been convicted. Not just accusations, but convicted, but he's indicting Trump over $300,000. So, once again, Trump indictment updates. Violation of New York Penal Code. There you have it. Indicted in Manhattan. Indicted by grand jury. Manhattan grand jury by CNN, NBC, The Washington Post. Indicted by grand jury. Slated to appear in court Tuesday. That's the arraignment, right? So, 2 days ago. This one doesn't have a date. Yesterday for this one. CNBC indictment live updates and latest news from yesterday. Not expected to be unsealed on Friday, which makes sense that they wouldn't just unseal it for public review. It will end up seeing it as the case unfolds. It is what it is. It's typically how it works. The 30th of March, New York Times, he is indicted. Grand jury indicted Trump Thursday, his role in paying hush money to a porn star. PBS, Donald Trump indicted, lawyer says. Like, you get the point, right? He's indicted. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out, so many sources, The Atlantic, The Time, like Time Magazine, The Guardian. The reason I'm pointing this out is because the argument was, well, he's not even indicted. Yes, he is. They indicted him. People just don't want to pay attention to it because there's other shit going on in the world, first of all. Second of all, they just hate Trump. Trump derangement syndrome is a very real thing. Very real. So he did, in fact, get indicted by the city of Manhattan grand jury, which is laughable when you look at in relation to who said that this was insufficient. Now, how much money is Trump being indicted for? Yesterday, CNN, $130,000. $130,000. CNBC, Trump indictment. No specific money here. We have to open it. Like I said, we're not doing that. CNBC, again, down here from Thursday, $130,000. You see what I'm saying? 130,000 comes up a whole lot. New York Magazine, finally indicted. Politico, 2 days ago, $130,000. USA Today, $280,000. This is the one time that I think I saw $280,000. Okay, there you go. We'll round it up, say 300,000. APN, like AP News, rather. I'm sorry, AP. So the Associated Press. Indicted, expected to surrender early next week. It's supposed to happen Tuesday for his arraignment. No amount of money here, but from the Guardian in this portion. USA Today, $130,000. HuffPost, $130,000. Hush money. Okay. Now, like I said, one time it mentions 280,000. Almost every other time, because some of these we have to open the article, and like I said, I'm not going to open them and read it. We're not going to go through all that. But it's $130,000 is what's being reported predominantly. But we'll go with 300,000. Why not? Like I said, 300,000 still just a drop in the bucket. Now, arraignment, just to make sure that this is taking place. 21 hours ago, the Washington Post. Preparations underway for arraignment in New York court on Tuesday. Mass Live, Secret Service to accompany Trump during booking arraignment on Tuesday. CNN, Donald Trump expects to appear in court Tuesday. It's the arraignment. Again, Newsweek, Trump attorneys come out fighting as arraignment looms. Fox, John Yoo prospects sequences of events during arraignment an hour ago. Fox News. Once again, HuffPost. Lindsey Graham suggests Trump punch a cop on the way to Tuesday's arraignment. Like, that's absurd. I didn't read this. I don't know if he actually said that. That's completely out of line. I believe everyone would agree that's completely out of line. Why? Like, I understand he's saying that they should do this, he should do that, because this is completely an out of line and abuse of power effort by the DA, Alvin Bragg, to have this take place. And that these cops doing so is arguably a violation of one form or another. Out of line. Doesn't matter. Some random questions in relation that don't matter. PBS. Trump to be arraigned Tuesday to face New York City indictment. What is an arraignment? Because people don't understand. The arraignment's just the next step in the process. Videos of Trump arraignment, which makes no sense because it hasn't happened yet, right? Explore Trump arraignment with videos. Once again, it's all just about indictment. You can see that here. None of it's actually arraignment because it hasn't happened. It's happening Tuesday. Fortune magazine. Donald Trump's arraignment time set for his case. To stay at his tower Monday night in preparation for Tuesday. Trump indictment charges come at arraignment. NBC New York. Inside what Trump arraignment in Manhattan will look like. CNN. For Trump arraignment, Desmond's Secret Service agents secure. Obviously, they're going to secure the area. Former president. That's the way it works. Washington Post. Trump indictment and live updates. Once again, it just pops up for everything you search. The Hill. Trump to travel to New York Monday ahead of this Tuesday arraignment. CNN, Trump expected to appear in court Tuesday for his arraignment. Independent UK, right? So global news. Court officially confirms date and time for Trump arraignment. So this is very clearly taking place. Now, why should this matter to you outside of an abuse of authority and a violation of the justice system? Well, put it quite simply, if we're now going to throw people in jail for like $300,000 of hush money, which is illegal, but has also historically, time and time again, for basically every president, has been a fine. A fine. This escalation against what federal judges are saying to do opens up a terrible door to abuse all of us. Imagine that what this means an equivalent to the average person, right, is you go through an intersection on a yellow light, or the light turned red as you got to it, but you were trying to hit a yellow light, and it's got cameras, so the cameras flash you. Normally they mail you a ticket for running a red light, right? Imagine you speed by one of the vans on the side of the road, it flashes you, gives you a speeding ticket. This normally shows up in your mail. It's a speeding ticket. Here you go. No points or anything off of your license because it's not coming physically from a police officer. It's coming from a camera system. So no points, pay your fine, move on with your life. All of a sudden, instead of just sending you this, the police come and kick in your door with a no-knock warrant, and then they arrest you and put you in jail for 2 weeks for your speeding ticket or your photo that got taken going through a red light. Okay, that's the similar situation that this opens up for the average person. So it's a complete miscarriage of justice is what this is, and that is why it matters. It is abuse of power, it's corruption, it's miscarriage of justice. That should bother you. Now, I was going to grab my phone because I don't want to pull this up and blast this person because it's his actual name, and I'm not that kind of individual. But I just want to make sure that I don't forget the point that I wanted to make sure I touched on in regards to this, because it's ridiculous. Oh, yes. So going through a list of things that Trump has done. I've seen this happen through multiple people as well. Like, for instance, inflated, deflating property values for loans and tax breaks. Tried to get Georgia official to lie and change the state to Trump during the 2020 elections. Classified materials in his home, which supposedly had aides copying to a computer. Now, and then it all just boils down to he's a criminal, he deserves to be arrested. Now, here's the thing. None of these things, first of all, are what he's being indicted for. He's not being charged for any one of these things. Second of all, he paid fines on the property stuff, so should he now be arrested for something he's already faced a punishment for? Because if that's the case, then every curfew ticket, every speeding ticket, every traffic violation you've ever had, any kind of ticket or citation you've ever received, every year the police and the justice system should come by and they should arrest you for now. Not give you a ticket, arrest you. Right? Because that was what happened with his property issues. He had to pay fines. Right? Which some of those he got around with bankruptcies, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So we now hold people accountable for things that they've already been punished for over and over and over again? Or don't we have a law written into our federal laws, and I believe amendment to our Constitution, to prevent this from happening, called double jeopardy, where you're not allowed to be tried and punished for something, for the same crime repeatedly, right? So that is a ridiculous argument to make, because you're arguing for miscarriage of justice and abuse of power. Why would you argue that the government should do this to anyone? It makes no sense. Try to get the Georgia official to lie and change the state to Trump. That's not a crime. Like, first of all that Trump did to try and have that happen was make statements. He didn't put forth efforts of federal government agencies to apply pressure and make this happen. He just made public statements. You can say whatever the fuck you want. You have a First Amendment right to say whatever you want, as long as you're not making explicit calls to violence. Like Lindsey Graham suggesting Trump punch a cop. That is an explicit call for violence. To say punch a cop and tell someone to do so is an explicit call to violence. Saying fight like hell is not an explicit call to violence. Explicit call to violence means you're specifically calling out a very specific action. Fight like hell could mean several things. Hey, you should punch a cop on this day during this event. That's explicit. Okay? That's very different. The classified materials. You could literally go to any former president's house. You could go to Biden right now as the current sitting president's house and offices. You could go to any Congress member or Senate member's house and offices, and you're going to find classified information. The reports of aides copying that information is complete hearsay. There's never been anything to prove so, and the FBI even reported that when they received these documents, they received them from a safe within Trump's office at Mar-a-Lago. Now, as somebody who's been in the military in a special operations unit, who spent 2.5 years roughly helping organize, schedule, deconflict, training exercises, request to use aircraft for sometimes just normal operations, not just training, etc., that were classified. Sometimes top secret classified. I'm very familiar with what you have to do to properly store, transfer, or even carry classified documents of the highest level, because sometimes you have to go to briefings with this information that is classified. You have to carry it in specific types of ways to safeguard that information. Trump keeping these documents in a safe, by description that the FBI gave us of that safe as well, that safe is rated high enough for top secret documents. The building is not. The safe is. Okay? So he took the necessary steps to protect the documents that he had. Once again, he didn't do anything wrong. It's just a consequence of being in that position. Is you're going to have documents and files that have classified information, and you have to be responsible in how you store them. And if you want to try and turn the whole thing of those documents and the Mar-a-Lago not being a location rated for those documents, neither is a hotel, even a 5-star hotel. However, on a regular basis, we have ambassadors, we have government officials, we have military officials that have classified information that are at hotels, 5-star or less, and it is legal for them to store those documents in that lower grade safe within that hotel room. Every hotel room has a safe in it. You can store those documents in there. Like, that's the way it works. Sorry to burst your bubble. So, every one of the examples that's given, not at all accurate. Now, I'm not saying that Trump should be absolved of anything he did wrong here. If they were saying, Trump has hush money and he's being fined, I would have been like, yeah, that's the typical punishment. But this is a miscarriage of justice, it's abuse of power, and it's corruption. It is not the same thing. It's actually very dangerous. It opens up a door to abuse their power against every single person within the confines of the United States. You should care. And to come back around to why this matters more to people who don't like Trump at all, people with Trump derangement syndrome who are just celebrating that he's arrested, that's foolish as hell. Not just because of the fact that this opens a door for people like Trump or the Republican Party who you can't stand to abuse the same system in the same way against you, because that's what this type of thing does. It doesn't just work one direction, it works both ways. Aside from that, this has made Trump very likely to win the next election. Do you understand that? Because people see this and they understand exactly what I'm saying. The only people who don't agree are people who just can't stand Trump because Oompa Loompa bad. Not anything else. It's just, Orange Man bad, Oompa Loompa get what he deserve. Anger, outrage. Because of name and face. Not at all because of action, not at all because of what took place, not at all because of the facts in regard to what's going on, but just TDS. It is what it is. Thing is, it's pushed him ahead. The only person who was maybe going to be in his way was Ron DeSantis. And Ron DeSantis has also come out and made statements that this is going to push Trump ahead. Ron DeSantis very likely may end up running with Trump because of this. And if you have a DeSantis-Trump duo, I really don't see any candidates from any other parties that are going to outdo them. I just don't. There's a lot of support for both of those politicians. Both of them have their ups and downs, as any human does. But too many people, especially because of the way that DeSantis handled the pandemic, like both of them. And if they're united, I don't see them losing. I don't know of any politicians that have the same kind of support as those two. Not to mention the fact that DeSantis has support of like rhinos, right? So Republicans who don't like Trump, the Republicans who side with the Democrats on just about everything, but they don't actually push any conservative or Republican legislation. Rhino being an acronym for Republican in name only, right? Those people support DeSantis. They don't like Trump. That's my point about the two of them being together. And that seems to be what is happening here. And I don't know if you saw this. Here, Trump campaign says it raised more than $4 million in 24 hours, in the first 24 hours after Trump's indictment. $4 million in 24 hours for him to run as president because of this. A lot of that is small donations. Small donations. It's not huge donors. It's small individual American citizens saying, how do I donate? Here's $100. I can give 1,000. Here's 1,000. That's totaled up to $4 million in a 24-hour time span. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous amount of money in a very short period of time for a campaign fund. So maybe instead of celebrating this because you just don't like the person, you should look at the facts. You should look at the actions. You should compare past crimes of the same extent, because Trump is like, what, a sixth of the amount of money, roughly? A sixth, a seventh, the amount of money that Obama did the exact same thing with. That's not good. That's not good at all. It's a little bit more than a sixth. Right? A little bit more than a sixth. Less than a seventh, but a little more than a sixth. like, or 6 times as much money. Obama had more than 6 times as much hush money. He had 1.9 million versus 300,000 by Trump. 6 times as much by Trump would be 1.8 million. 6 times as much. 1.8 million. Obama's was 1.9, and he paid a fine. So, rather than being upset because Orange Man bad, stop worrying about the name. Start paying attention to the facts, the actions. Compare things that are legal like this, where someone's indicted and charged with crimes, to past events. And you're going to have a better idea of if something's being done fairly, if it's just, if it's a corrupt effort, if there's something else going on. Because when you see something like this, something that's this egregious, you really need to start applying critical thinking and trying to think of why exactly would you try to arrest somebody for something that is illegal, but when it was committed at an extent of more than 6 times as egregious, it was only a fine. Then why are you arresting this person? Doesn't make sense. When you remove the names and you just look at the facts, one person's being arrested for 1/6 as egregious, the exact same crime that resulted in a fine. Doesn't that make you ask some questions and say, wow, maybe this is corrupt as fuck? Because it sure does for me. So, that's all I have to say on that. I just really hope people can stop hearing the name, seeing the face, and going, rah, 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 and instead start applying some thought. Because, like I was going on with yesterday about division, that's exactly what they use Trump and the Oompa Loompa for. Division. And it works very effectively and immediately. It's too bad. Well, let's change over our stream. It's time for fun.